sector have been delayed. The CEO of Screen Producers Australia is next. Welcome back. The federal government has consistently delayed its plans to introduce local content requirements for major streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon and Paramount. The expectation is that these large streaming services will be forced to spend a percentage of their revenue producing local content, which is great news for our local film industry. There's been lots of consultation with the sector, but a sticking point has been the US presidential election and whether these rule changes violate Australia's free trade agreement with America. For more on this, I'm joined by Screen Producers Australia Chief Executive Matthew Deaner. Matt, thanks so much for your time. Just set the scene for us here. What are these new proposed regulations? Where are they at right now in Australia?
Yeah, so Australia's in this sort of unique position where it's got traditional media that's regulated to release and produce Australian content to Australian audiences, stimulating a lot of production activity, making sure we've got a great creative industry with lots of parts of that moving forward. But there's been no regulation on streaming services and proposals that have gone back to about 10 reviews across multiple governments, all to say, let's do it, let's get on with it, let's make it happen, but no final will to actually get that line over the sand, if you like. So we've got this problem now in the system where a lot of people have been told that this would start on the 1st of July this year. That was the promise from the government's Revive policy announced in January last year. So you've really got a big delay now, and a lot of people in development, no activity happening, a big problem for business, and I think a big problem for audience. And you sort of got now a problem now where Australia's out of sync with the rest of the world. Countries such as Canada have regulated to go forward with this. Europe's had this for a number of years. So we are now behind, and you're therefore not getting the kind of buy-in at an appropriate level from the big global businesses to commit to Australian content. As they've done in other territories, which is a big problem. And yes, there are, as you've alluded to, there are factors in train to do with our US-Australian free trade agreement. But that's a well-known element here. That was negotiated in 2004. There's a carve-out for streaming services. Everyone's known it exists. It's been a part of conversations. So there really shouldn't be any obstacles. I think that this is really then now about the fact that there's been a US election and an inability to kind of negotiate and formalise the conversations with the US government during the last 6 months.
All right, well, now that election wrapped up this week and the new administration, obviously Trump won't be inaugurated till the 20th of January next year, but is now when the government really starts conversing again with America to try and figure out these rules and get them over the line here in Australia? I guess the other problem is there's a federal election in Australia coming up early next year as well, and that probably usually always delays legislation, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a double problem here where we've got our own election next year and the US election that's just happened. But I don't think this is out of the question that it should be able to be navigated. You've got really a set of people that are motivated to get it done. The streamers themselves have always said they're up for regulation. I think what it's been about has been a level of delay and obfuscation and a bit of distraction in the process of trying to nail down exactly what we're talking about. And for us, we're really motivated by the idea that there's a decent quantum of money in an ongoing way supplied to the sector, and that's reasonably spread across different genres. If you're a parent now, you really can't find Australian children's content for love or money. And I think a lot of Australians can't find really great services. It's sort of every so often you get a great pop-up, like I think we were talking earlier about Territory off camera being a great show on Netflix. But, you know, a swallow does not a summer make is a great expression because it's about the consistency of employment, the consistency of work, the quantity of stuff that just lifts the whole ecology. So, yeah, you've really got to get all that pinned down and nailed. And there is the opportunity, I think, to kind of now move this forward now that we've got a new administration. I think, you know, there's a challenge around it. I don't think anyone's, you know, oblivious to the fact that free trade agreements aren't necessarily easy always, and you've got a new administration to navigate through that process. But we have this carve out, and I think that everyone would expect that Australians can receive and see their own, stories on screens. And we are being affected by these streamers in a big way. And they've taken a lot of money off the table for traditional media, which normally supports the industry in this sort of endeavour, and supplies to Australians. And if you've got Netflix making $1.5 billion a year, paying no tax, delivering what you'd say would be window dressing, nice window dressing as it is in terms of content, but less even from the other services like Disney Plus or Amazon or Paramount Plus, as you mentioned, then really not contributing to the ecology. And I'm very much told internationally that we are seen as the honeypot to the Americans in terms of those businesses looking at us, because we supply a lot of coin as subscribers, and there's a lot of profit on the table without necessarily the need for big investments being made here compared to traditional broadcast services, traditional cable satellite services. So I think it's only fair that everyone contributes to the whole ecology appropriately. I think that's what stimulates certainly the business layer, which you're talking about many, many small businesses. I represent over 800 small businesses across Australia. And I also think Australians expect that of those media services. They like and lean into Australian content when it's made well with a lot of money behind it, and that's the reality. It costs money. But you have to be able to do that for your audience. And I think that that's incumbent on everyone in this sort of process, including the Australian government. And they really have to lean in, I think, as I said, but they have to really stand up for Australians in this space and take on what are very big global businesses and the US government in the process to really stand up for what's important for Australians.
Yeah, we obviously love watching TV here and love watching Australian dramas, but just looking at the sector here as a whole, the Aussie film and screen sector, how much pressure is it under right now with where the economy's sitting and consumer spending obviously dying off a little bit due to inflation and high interest rates?
In terms of the local industry, in terms of local stories, local writers, local IP, local producers, local lead actors, that's been very much hot and cold for a long time now. You haven't had a lot of support from commercial television, which has had itself mostly deregulated in this space during COVID. Subscription television's kept its end of the deal going, but because of this absence of regulation in now the most impactful and demonstrably effectual way of Australians getting screen content in the streaming services, we've had a lot of business delays, and that's creating a lot of uncertainty. And when you do that, not only do you create a lot of problems for people, but you get a lot of our talent, our writers, our directors, our lead actors going offshore to find that work back in the US or in the UK.
Matthew Diener from Screen Producers Australia, thanks for your time.
No worries, thank you.
Well, that's all for the show this Sunday. Up next is all the